Okay, yes, my name is Anna Bremer, and I'm really happy to be here with you. And thank you for people who are coming in at all times of their day. I really appreciate it. So I'm hoping this will be informative, and we're just going to move right along. The intent of this is about differentiating construction process functions from the functions of the actual project. So the purpose of the webinar is to apply function analysis to the design and construction process, and being the process rather than the project itself. And this is distinguishing one-time construction-related functions from the project facility type functions. And we're going to develop a very, very rough FAST diagram. We'll do some function identification in order to do that. And the intent here, I've applied for PDUs for this with SAVE, and I've asked for one PDU, and as soon as I know we've got them, I'll let Mushtaq know, and then you guys will know. Okay, so I can't see everybody, but I'd like to get a vague idea of, out of curiosity, among the participants today, how many of you facilitate value management workshops?
Please, you can open your camera.
You can open your camera and wave your hand.
Yeah. Estevan is there, Mr. Tariani.
Hi. We may or may not get a lot of people raising hands. They may just be listening kind of, halfway. So how many are CVSs?
Well, you have a good 7 or 8 here.
Okay. How many are CVS or seeking their CVS certification?
That might be quite a few.
Okay, great. How many are familiar with the construction industry and or have been involved on value management studies for the construction industry?
Well, still we have about 8 or 9 people.
Okay, interesting. Well, yeah, okay, it's so funny. I could customize this a few different ways, but I'm just going to kind of move forward. Anybody who is an owner of these projects that we do the value management for? Any of the public agencies or private clients?
Yes, Anna, we do that from City of
Okay,
Calgary.
great.
Yep.
Great. And so you and I already talked a little bit, and in this presentation, I'm using construction manager general contractor, which is interchangeable with CMAR, construction manager at risk. So if you guys can extrapolate when you see the GCCM, it's the same thing as CMAR. So we're just going to move right along. All depends on where you're from. So with construction project delivery, we all know if you're in construction that the delivery method it really defines the owner-designer-contractor relationship. It sets the stage for the entire project. And the value methodology is a tool to bring everybody together and get a common understanding. And it can help optimize design and make the project easier and faster to construct and reduce risk and cost, all while maintaining the functions of the project. And we all would like to say that on the design bid build, where the designer designs it, then it's bid by the contractor, and then the contractor works on it, never really having much interface with the designer, except for asking clarification questions or in the change order process. So ultimately, in either scenario, the owner can select the right combination of ideas that'll help move their project forward. But what I'm here today to talk a little bit about are the benefits of getting the contractor involved during pre-construction. So this is the traditional project delivery model, which is design, bid, build. And it's a classic org chart where there's connections between the project owner and designer and connections between the general contractor and project owner. But that's very top down. And there is a relationship here, but not a lot goes on with it in terms of constructive, creative process. So there tends to be a situation where the general contractor is not part of the design at all. There tend to be change orders, and it can be adversarial. So something that came along many, many moons ago was the idea that a project owner would have a construction manager involved on a design bid build project. And that construction manager served to protect the owner from all of these problems that come from change orders and the problems that, can arise from that. So the basic function of the construction manager, I'm saying, is protect owner. And I'm going to speak to you guys as if you know all about function analysis, but if you have questions, please raise your hand, and Mushtaq, I'm looking for you to call on people if somebody has a question, okay?
You can drop it on the chat as well.
Okay, and I can't see that, so I'm going to need your help with that, okay? All right, so if you look at the typical construction project, you will see there's a design process and then the construction process. And in the old-fashioned design bid build, the construction takes place after the design is complete. So it's after the bid documents, and there's no interface or overlap of involvement of the contractor during the design process. And this also aligns with return on investment for value engineering or value management, or using the value methodology, whatever you want to call that. And as we most of us know, if you start out and you do a value study early in design, 15 to 30%, you have a higher rate of a return on investment on the workshop, because there's a lot more things that you can do early in design. So as time goes on, those opportunities diminish, and once you're into construction, there just isn't a lot that you can do to make the project better from a value engineering standpoint. You will find contractors doing value engineering change proposals, and those, as we all know, are typically oriented around scope reduction or cost reduction, and it's sort of a desperation mode rather than keeping the functionality. They do achieve that, but it's not as effective as value engineering done early. So at the same time, that opportunity for value improvement decreases, the cost of making changes from value engineering increases. So you do end up with a point where somewhere between the 30 and 60% design, you hit a point where it's going to cost you to make changes. And then once you're in construction, it's just not practical. We just know that, because if you're having to extend design beyond the bid date, it's just not going to happen. So it reduces opportunities for value improvement and partnering between the owners, designers, and design bid build contractor. Please forgive me. So in the general contractor construction manager type of project delivery, which is akin to CMAR, I'm proposing that instead of the traditional org chart type of a functionality, that it's more of a Venn diagram. There's overlaps between the various parties, and there can be this intersection where everybody's talking about the same issues and solving problems together before they ever become problems. So what that looks like is you've got the contractor involved early on, and all of a sudden you have this intersection of having good return on investment with a reasonable amount of cost for changes, and you're not down here where you can't make changes anymore. So it really has a lot of benefits. It can actually set up for partnering. It can prevent change orders. It can really prevent the adversarial thing, which can lead into the litigation, which I've been part of, and nobody wants to go there. Nobody does. So I'm just proposing that maybe in the value management, value engineering world, we can help with that. If, and this is the big if we can educate our public clients that the budgets for design need to include participation in the whole VE study. And I'll get to that more in a minute. So I want to give an example case study of a project that I did early this year. and it's an electric bus yard refurbishment. So this is one of those scenarios with overhead catenary systems where the buses hook up to those, and then they can also run on their own. But anyway, their whole facility needed a tremendous amount of work. Their concrete, just a mess there, and these are heavy vehicles. So we looked at a Portland cement concrete system, and the biggest challenges with this project weren't the design and technical aspects of it. It was managing the scope and the construction and site constraints. That was the big challenge, and actually the area of the greatest risk and potential cost impact.
Excuse me,
Where you
Anna,
can't
just give me a
control the
second. I
cost.
think some people have their microphone on. Can you please mute it? Thank you.
Yes. Thank you. So when you have design happening and it's disconnected from having discussions with the contractor, that design, I think we still have somebody who's not muted. I hear a child, I think, and I don't think it's my cat.
No, it's done now.
Okay, thank you. All right. Oh, sorry about that. All right. So I've got to get my track back on here. In this scenario, when there's that disconnect, it increases risk and construction cost and potentially construction duration. And also, this was a fully operating facility, so it couldn't impact operations. And so this is a very challenging project. It wasn't a huge project, and I'm kind of leaving the name of the client out and the amount, but it was substantial enough. And what we were able to do for this workshop is we saved an 8% in first cost and had an average of 48% performance improvement. And I'll show you the performance attributes here in a second. So the owner representative on this project said this about it. And, we came up with alternative designs and approaches and sequencing, and it helped with cost avoidance. But I think the most important thing is the thing in bold. It assisted greatly in galvanizing the owner representative, designer, and general contractor as a team and laid the groundwork for successful partnering. So I think really I'm doing a little rah-rah for CMAR, but we're going to move on into the functions of this. So on that project, the performance attributes were as follows. And you can see by a long ways the operational efficiency and construction impacts were the most important thing to them. They had to maintain operations. They still had to serve all those riders who use their service. So that was a big thing. And of course, these typical ones you see typically on performance attributes: maintainability, sustainability, durability, all of that sort of thing. Future compatibility was an interesting aspect of this as well. So moving right along, I feel like I'm just talking and I don't get to have a dialogue yet, so it's a little frustrating. But I'm sure that you are
We are listening to your comments intently.
Okay. I'm sure you're very familiar with the typical, and I'm curious to know if this is the case in Canada, but most value studies that I work on are for design, bid, build contracts. And what that means is just what I've been talking about. The designer is over here. We don't even have a contractor involved yet. So you have to bring in a construction management expert who is unfamiliar with the project, which isn't a bad thing. You can still get a lot of good ideas from that. But the really concerning thing is that the designer presents their project, and instead of having them involved during the workshop, all they do is show up for a midpoint review and for the presentation. So the VE team doesn't really interface with them, and it misses a tremendous opportunity for really good brainstorming and working together rather than having the perpetuated perception of VE destroying somebody's project design. I mean, I don't know how often you've heard it, but I've sure heard, my project has been VE'd. And that's not a good thing. That means that somebody looks at the value process as something that's critical to their design and they don't see it as benefiting anything. So I'm hoping that we can maybe educate our owners about the idea that I'm proposing here of getting the contractor on board early and involving the designer during the workshop. I mean, in function analysis, in creativity, and even in evaluation and development. So for this particular project I was on, the construction and engineering approaches presented major opportunities for value improvement under that contract. There was a heavy emphasis on the construction process and design goals. So when we did our FAST and function analysis process, this FAST diagram does what we normally see. It shows functions of the facility itself and functions of construction. And typically, I'd love to see raised hands if people don't see this, but in my experience, typically, because one-time functions are something that happen once in the life of a facility, those are usually considered construction related because it only happens once. It's in the construction of the project, and once the project is up and running, you don't have to worry about that anymore. So when we did this, we found that the permitting, sectionalizing power, and all of these other functions really were construction functions. And of course, in the facility functions, they all support the basic function, and these do too. All of these things are supporting functions. We will, in the VE world and in the certification world, etc., we call secondary functions anything really to the right of the basic function, but then there are also when functions, and this only had one. So at the same time you're supporting the load, you're parking buses. Anyway, so moving along from this, I don't want to get all hung up in this project. I want us to take a big step back and think about the construction process itself. So essentially, we are going to look at the construction process, which is this stuff. And I had the opportunity, oh goodness, it was probably 5 years ago, I worked with a construction management firm, and we came up with a FAST diagram for construction management in the design bid build world, where it's back when the basic function is to protect the owner. Okay. In that case, there were some immediately supporting functions of minimizing negative impacts. And those, I don't know if you can see this or not, it'll be better on the handout. But when you, okay, so if you say, how do you protect the owner? By minimizing negative impacts. And how do you do that? By managing issues and leveraging opportunities. And so how do you protect the owner? By avoiding claims. How do you avoid claims? By developing solutions. And this involves communication and teamwork. And again, that's hard to do after the fact. It's hard to get teamwork when nobody's ever known each other, and here we are in construction. So another thing that happens at the same time as you're developing solutions in the design bid build scenario is administering change orders and minimizing change orders. So the when functions are in white, and the function logic path is in green. So we have the green, and then we've got the white here, which is a when function. Okay. So I've been talking about this a lot, and the big difference with a VM workshop when you have a fully integrated GCCM team is that you have all the parties participate in the job plan phases. You have all four of these folks participating in information, function analysis, creativity, and evaluation. And what's really interesting is you have more time for development of the ideas because all the people you'd be presenting to are in the room. And among the owners, the other thing that I push really hard to get are the actual operations and maintenance people, because they are the people who have to live with what is put forth. So getting their input is really crucial, and they're very, very busy people. So the earliest you can plant that seed and start getting that lined up, it makes a big difference. And in the few times I've been able to have the ops and maintenance people involved in a workshop, it has been so beneficial. So I really, really encourage that. So when we did that design, bid, build, construction management fast, the higher order function, and I'm just using HO for higher order, B for basic, and S for secondary. We don't need to get into lower order, but if we find that we've got some design objectives and one-time functions and so forth, we'll cross that bridge when we get to them. But in that scenario, protecting the owner was the basic function, and achieving the project goals was the higher order. And as you saw, there was minimizing negative impacts, and I threw a few of them up here just for examples. And what I'm going to ask you guys to do, and I have done a beginning here just to kind of get you thinking about it, what functions would support these. And what I've got to ask you first, and I'm really looking for input here. If you had a project that is being managed holistically like this, where everything's integrated and there's team building and you have a chance to really work together, what would you say is the basic function of that process? It's probably not just protect owner anymore. It's probably something bigger than that. So I'm curious to know, and I'm hoping, Mushtaq, people are raising their hands and you can call on them. And I'm going to switch over. I'm going to end my show, and I'm going to share the beginnings of a fast diagram so I can capture these.
Well, feel free to speak up if you have some ideas, please. Well, Alan mentioned deliver project.
Okay.
Yeah, I would say something like get project built.
Hang on for a quick second. My brain's.
So the question was, what's the basic function? When everybody's integrated or something like that?
Okay, 719. Why am I not finding this? Okay, there we go. Sorry about that, guys. I even had it coded. Okay, so let me, you can still see my screen, right?
Yes.
So I'm going to challenge you a little bit, because I am one of those folks who's been on the certification board. And when you say deliver project, it's close to an activity. Do you guys know what an activity is? The difference between a function and an activity? Mushtaq?
Yes.
Enlighten us.
I think the preparation to support a function is an activity.
Right. An activity is a way of performing the function.
Yes.
Okay. So you deliver the project, but what is the overarching goal of this thing? What are we trying to do? What's the one thing this project has to do?
Collaborate effectively or something.
Okay.
Well, it has to achieve the desired outcomes.
Very good.
Achieve outcome. Okay.
Okay. And I'm going to tell you, when you take your CVS exam, you only want two-word functions, but I am fine as long as the noun is 2 words, but I would never have a 2-word verb. So that's great. So I'm going to throw that over here as a basic function. Okay, for right now. And the whole point of having this on the screen like this is we can move things around. So I threw these up here, and you guys can toss them if you want. But when I look at a project and I do function analysis, I allocate costs over functions. I look at schedule impacts relative to the functions. I look at risk relative to functions. And the functions themselves are the performance and quality oriented things. But how you perform the functions obviously is the specific stuff about function and quality. So other functions. Does anybody else have another basic function? Like the one thing this has to do? I think this is excellent.
So I wouldn't have mitigate risk as a basic function. I would have manage risk.
Okay, and these don't have to be basic functions. I'm looking for you to tell me where they go.
So if you're looking at your 3 Ps, you're going to have to manage risk. You're going to have to achieve schedule.
What was the achieve schedule?
Achieve schedule, whatever that criteria is.
So this is real similar to that. Okay. Would you say that this one is duplicative and I can eliminate it?
Yes, but I like using outcome versus output because people sometimes get down in the weeds. But yes, project goals is fine. They're outcomes if they're worded that way.
Well, okay,
Sometimes they're
so
not.
hang on. So I'm just leaving it, I'm leaving this one and I'm deleting this guy. Okay. So, do you guys feel like the main things that have to happen to make this happen are these? Are there other things that need to happen to achieve the desired outcome? They may be functions that need to happen to make these happen, but there may be something else. This is your fast diagram. It's not mine.
So I put meet requirements or meet scope.
Okay. Oops. Hello. Okay. Would you say in the scheme of functions, is that a secondary function or might it be a design objective one time or all the time? Where would you say that that fits? Delete this.
I would suggest all the time.
Okay, because this is it's the construction process. It's not the facility. That's great. Okay.
Yes, but you could also say that because you're trying to achieve the desired outcome, it answers what you have to achieve: scope, schedule, risk, all that stuff. And if you're actually talking about getting the team to think about, so if this fast diagram is about what are the outcomes you want to achieve, one of them will be achieving the scope or meeting the scope.
Yeah.
And then there might be other ways to further down to achieve that.
Right on. Ooh, I'm sounding
Hey, everyone.
Canadian.
Hey,
I
everyone.
picked that up from a Canadian friend years ago. Right on.
How about manage resources? And then when I'm talking about resources, I'm thinking about personnel and different employees throughout the project management.
Okay. I think we can see it that way. Do you want me to put personnel resources? I think we're good.
Okay.
Okay. I'm just throwing these up here. These are not in any order or arrangement yet. I'm just kind of sliding them out of the way once we do one. How about other functions? We don't want to get too far in the trees because we don't have a ton of time today, but might we look at ways, what are functions that would support enhancing quality or controlling costs or achieving schedule? And we can cheat and go back and look at that other construction management fast diagram if you want. But, there's anticipating issues. There's all kinds of things,
What about understanding the needs, understanding the client needs?
Okay. So understand. I'm not, well, understand can be a verb. I'll go with it. Hello. All right. Other functions.
So you can change understand needs to characterize needs.
Ooh. Are you okay with that, Lucy?
Yeah, yes, it would be a subset of understanding the needs.
Okay. Okay. I'm going to just sort of put these in the same world here.
So I've got maybe somewhat of a question. We've got meet scope up there. How about define scope? Because in order to achieve the desired outcome, you have to define the desired outcome.
Okay. So in order to meet scope, you need to have defined it, right? So do you think that, where would that go on the fast diagram? Is that something that you would put kind of to the left or to the right? Where would you put that? Because we all know that as you move to the right, things are less abstract. to the left, they're more abstract and they're more the higher level goals and things we're trying to get done. Where would you put the defined scope?
I would almost say that it's outside of the scope.
Okay, so
I would
right
say
now,
far to the far left in higher order, maybe.
in higher order. Okay, we'll play with that.
I
Hang
would
on.
put it to the right.
This is one of the biggest challenges in learning fast diagram that I've seen. It's understanding that how, why logic, and we'll start playing with that here very shortly to make sure we're on track. I'm just gonna do a quick copy paste of the scope line and move a scope line over here so we're not lost. So Lucy, where would you put it?
I would put it to the right. You start with that, defining the scope. Why?
Okay.
So you can eventually meet it.
Is it inside the scope of the project or is it outside the scope of the project?
It would depend if you're doing the fast diagram of the whole thing, like from the birth of the client need to the delivery of the client.
Right.
And if
Well,
if
and
you're
I
just
have-
doing. Mhm.
I
So
have like,
it,
go ahead.
oh, sorry, and just me logically thinking about this, in order to have a scope, you have to define a scope so it becomes, it's
Right.
before the
So-
scope.
Right. So let's play with the logic on that just for kicks and giggles. All right. So if I said, why do we meet scope to define scope? Does that work for you?
No.
No.
Okay. What if we flipped it this way and say, why do we define the scope? And then the answer is to meet the scope.
Yes.
Does that make more sense?
Yes.
Okay. So the beautiful thing about functions is that this could be right next to each other, but there could be a whole bunch of functions in between in order to meet the scope. You might have to do all these things and so forth. So that's kind of, it's one of those things about fast diagramming that a function can be answered. Like if I said, how does it meet scope? By defining scope. It could do that, or it could be, how does it meet scope by, I don't know, let's say managing resources. And how does it manage resource, or how does the process manage resources? Well, you don't know what resources you need without defining scope, right? So that where I'm going with this is that you could have that, you could have anything, however you want it to look. But the beauty is with fast diagramming, there can be a function in between, and that's one of the reasons why I am a proponent of fast diagramming, because I have seen more often than not that there are redundant functions. So you come up with a list of functions and it turns out one of them is really redundant and you didn't need to be, addressing it, or there are missing functions. And that's what I see with fast diagramming, is it often identifies missing functions. So you guys tell me where you want these to go. I mean, we could play a little bit more, but I see this for sure. If you said, why define scope to manage resources? Why manage resources to meet the scope? So you're actually meeting the scope, you're achieving it. It's the same thing. And then you could say, why meet the scope? To achieve the desired outcome. And I don't know what our higher ordered function is yet.
Again, this may be a difference between jurisdictions.
Mm-hmm.
But one thing I thought was sort of missing from your original fast diagram with the CMGC was the whole concept of QA and QC, like basically verifying data in the field or something like that, right? And so normally if I was doing this for a typical design bid build project, I'd want to have a function on there for
like assure quality.
Well, assure quality, verify measurements, right?
Hang on for a quick second.
Well, assure quality, how do you do your control quality?
Mm.
And that's where you get your measurements. But enhanced quality is maybe a design objective. But if you're delivering whatever, you got quality schedule, resources, costs, all that stuff.
When you get to the field, you've got that whole QA QC bit to do.
So sorry, I'm just showing my guts here. So here's in this design bid build construction management, there's your verifying quality.
Mhm.
So,
Exactly.
in this track of minimizing negative impacts, you need to understand the documents. And why understand the documents? To be able to track the schedule, because that's one of them, validate the schedule, and verify quantity. So all those three things help you anticipate issues. And at the same time, you can dovetail schedules. And this was for another kind of specific thing. So that's a little bit weird on this. But the ultimate thing is identifying issues and opportunities, managing and leveraging them.
So in your scope of CMGC, you're
Uh-huh.
including this as well. I just want to make sure, because not all jurisdictions do. So
Right. And there's very much overlap. But what I'm proposing is that in addition to this, there may be a broader overarching thing that starts to happen. Instead of the basic function being to protect the owner, it may be, as you guys have already come up with, hang on, to achieve the desired outcome. It's a different way of looking at it. So that's really what I'm doing here, is just sort of running an experiment with you guys on what you think about that. So have I totally
For
plummeted
sure.
time?
Yes, go
Sorry.
ahead.
For sure, achieving desired outcome is much more positive than protecting the owner. I think protecting the owner is like you plan that you know that you're going to have trouble and you want
Right.
to protect the owner. Here it's more proactive, a lot more
Yes,
proactive.
collaborative.
Yes.
yeah, you're not just protecting the owner. I mean, this is the whole idea of bringing the CMGC. You're protecting the contractor as well, because you're reducing their risk. I mean, there's a lot of other protections going on.
Yeah. Well, it's reducing or managing risk for everybody. And and that's the big thing. That is where a lot of construction cost is buried in managing risk. And right now, we're facing all of the challenges with materials, inflation, supply chain. It's a very difficult time. So the risk aspect is huge. And we all know when risks run amok, costs go up. Also, when schedule goes up, cost goes up, you know? And frankly, when
Yes.
quality goes up, cost goes up.
So, can I ask you a question here? So, would protecting
Yeah.
the owner be better suited under managed risk?
Okay, we could do that. I'm not suggesting that protect owner goes away at all. Because if we're
So,
all working together, it should protect all parties, actually.
Yeah, but it doesn't become, it's not the focus of the
but
the process
yeah,
anymore.
the objective of a project is to deliver, right? The project.
Right.
And
So
so
would you guys,
protection in my mind would be a risk, managing risk.
right? So would you say, I'm trying to make sure, and I'm going off of what you guys think this is, which side of this would you put this on?
To the right.
Yeah, you'd almost be looking at that as a litigation type thing related to claims, and you can choose, you can come up with ideas to protect the owner related to claims, or to minimize harm or whatever. But that's a branch further down. Managing risk, controlling risk, transferring risk, all those things. First, identifying risk. How do you achieve your
Okay.
you
So
identify risk and you manage them, and then figure out managing means whoever gets them, you figure that out.
Yeah, it should be to the left.
okay.
Because how do you protect the owner by managing risk, right? And same with the, yeah.
And so where would you put this? And the thing is, of course, I know where I would put it, but this isn't my fast diagram. It's yours. So where do you want this?
To the right of manage risk. How do you manage risk? You identify it, you mitigate it, you blah blah blah.
Yep.
But then I would
And to test the
put,
logic, why do you
yeah.
identify it so you can manage it? That's exactly in the right spot.
Right.
And actually, you could also say instead of manage risk, control risk, because that's, when you think about it, you're trying to control schedule, control cost, control risk there.
You know, maybe this is just my risk management background. I am reluctant to say anybody can control risk. I think you can mitigate it, transfer it, avoid it, do all kinds of things, but it is really hard to control risk because there are just things that can happen that are out of your control. You know, they're just not things you could control.
Yeah.
That's my beat on risk, but you know, you guys might have a different perspective on that.
No, fair enough.
No, fair
Oh,
enough. And I would say when we manage risk, we protect the owner. That could be a win.
Ooh. Okay. So some of these, let's see here.
So Anna, you have approximately 5 more minutes for the. But if we are
Oh,
already
I
in the
need,
no, we are already in the discussion mode. But I'm just thinking that do you have additional
right.
slides that you
Well,
want to
and I didn't expect us to get through a whole fast diagram with this, but what I'm trying to get you to think about is the difference between construction process functions and the idea of finding ways to get everybody on the same page to, as you guys articulated it, to achieve the desired outcome. Everybody wants to have the thing be a success, you know?
Mhm.
So anyway,
So
I
does
feel
that
like,
mean that one of the boxes should actually be select contract type?
oh, okay. Whoops, we'll just go here.
That's a good one.
Where would you say that belongs?
one-time function though, right? Because once you
One-time function.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
I would also propose that could be a lower order function. That could be the first thing you choose to do before you ever get into any of this.
Yeah. Definitely all the way over to the right if it's not sitting right at the top.
So what's our consensus on where that should go?
I would put it as a one-time function.
Okay. Everybody okay with that?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So we've got this understand needs and characterize needs. These are sort of orphans right now. And you kind of have to characterize them to understand them. That's, I think, what you guys were saying. So why characterize? To understand. So how do you understand needs? By characterizing them. This could be smoother, but it's okay. So do the needs maybe have a lot more to do with quality or, I mean, they could.
Typically, they're performance, so it's related to meeting scope. Could be
I have
whatever you
scope exactly. Yeah, I put them up
How
with
do you
the
meet
scope.
scope? You understand the needs. How do you do that? You characterize the needs, and you can put that into your contract.
Where's our scope again?
The top line.
Oh, duh. Okay. So move that guy out of the way. So you're saying in order to meet scope, you've got to manage resources and understand needs like that. So in other words,
You could argue that
Like,
the managed resources also links to schedule as well, though.
okay.
I think your defined scope may be in the wrong spot. Right?
Okay. Where would you put it?
I'd put it to the left of understand needs, or in that, you know,
Oh,
yes. Because I can't define the scope unless I understand my needs.
Agreed.
so are we just about out of time there? We got 1 minute left, I
No, no,
think.
that's fine. I mean, I think maybe we leave it at a point and then open up the floor for further discussion or conversation from other participants as well.